see I've got my little bridge heater going again. It gets up to close to 400 degrees. I can heat this blade up really hot that way. I mean, I could do it with just my heat gun and blow hot air on this, and that would probably be hot enough actually, because it gets pretty hot too if you set it on the highest setting. But I like this. This is a real good approach, and it's easy to do. And the heater heats up really fast, so it works really good. All right, so let's see if we can get this off. Typically, whenever you do an elective surgery like this, they're always the hardest. It just seems to be my luck. And so far, that doesn't look like that's giving at all. Yeah, it's not cooperating at all, of course, and that's kind of the typical way it goes. And my heater just won't stay still either. It keeps bouncing off my little wood here. The knife is very hot, but it is not penetrating that joint at all. And I mean, when I say at all, I mean at all. That's just typical. Oh my gosh, I'm probably just going to have to get forceful and make it happen. It's going, but I'll probably end up breaking something else in order to get this loose, because this is very tight. Yeah, I felt something give there. Hopefully it's a good thing. Yeah, we're moving now finally. A little bit at a time. Trying to get a little bit of movement all the way across it so I don't split it. It's pretty bad when something is this far apart and you still have to take more of it apart. Ouch. That blade is very hot, I can tell you that. There we go. Maybe. But there's still one little section there I haven't been able to get the knife into. Hopefully it'll go in now. Well, every time I need to try to do that section, this heater jumps off the table and I have to lose my heat. There it is, maybe. Yeah, it came off okay. The little bridge there, tail bridge or whatever you want to call that, stayed on there, which is perfectly fine. But otherwise it came off fairly cleanly. So that'll help. Now we'll move on. Well friends, I've kind of worked myself into a hole here. I told you the order of operations is very important, and I didn't see this one coming exactly, though I probably should have. And that is that it's pretty much impossible to get this block in here the way it's broken out, because I've got the sides glued back together. I can get one side in like this and squeeze it in, but this one has to go under here also. Both of them need to go under, and you think, well, you could put it in from the inside, and that doesn't quite work either. Almost does though, mostly because this has to go down under some of this, and I may be monkeying with this for a little while before I figure out how I'm going to fix it. I may have to actually cut something a little bit, or I don't know. It's almost fittable the way it is. I may just have to force it and see what happens. But I'll monkey with that a bit here and see if I can't get that to fit up. But once we get that piece in there, you can pretty much see we've got a full body, and it's not that bad a shape, really. Well, my friends, I've actually had to take apart something that I glued together yesterday. I glued this side down yesterday, and I since broke it loose again because I just couldn't get this to fit in there. Now that I've got that side flexible where I can get this in there, it almost goes back together, but there's a couple of points of contention that it'd probably be hard to show, and I've blackened them in where it's actually making contact and stopping me from going, or at least that's where I think that the problem is. And I'm going to take my little Dremel with a little cutter bit on it and try to work out some of the problem areas to get this to go back together better. As you can see here, it just won't go together. I can't seem to make it fit, so I'm going to have to make it fit by other means since it just won't go together nicely. We'll just have to force it, if you will. Though, as I look at it, it's actually lined up pretty good on the outside. So I don't know, maybe there's wood missing that maybe I just need to look at it closer. Maybe there's just actually some wood missing. No, it's not lining up along the back here. It seems to be lining up out here, but it's not lining up here. And so that's kind of ironic as well. So there is something wrong here. I'm going to have to give it a little more thought because I just can't quite figure out what's stopping it from going together. It's not readily obvious. But I'll figure it out. This is a little bit like the dentist cutting away stuff to make the crown or whatever fit. It's a little bit like that. That looks a lot better from the inside, and it's looking a lot better from the outside, though it's still not quite there. It's very close.
Say when it rains, it's the Lord shedding tears. He's crying for all our pain and our fears. Now I know, don't believe what they say.
I think we might be good there now. I'm trying to get the Purfling to line up across this way. It's pretty close. I still want just a hair better, but it's pretty darn close. There it is. I squeezed it in there that time. If we can get that all together, get it clamped up, I think we're in good shape. We've still got a little fill there, but sometimes that just happens.
'Cause if it were the truth, he'd be crying today.
I think that's as close as we're gonna get. So let's get her glued up and see what happens. This is gonna be a tricky one.
I thought when my heart stopped, the world would stop too. But now I know life won't stop for you. This crazy world keeps spinning.
It doesn't make it easy that almost everything you got to clamp to is round or crooked or something, so it's just not a simple glue up.
It's here in my heart, and I can't make a sound.
Off camera, I have monkeyed with the alignment of all of that a lot, and I've got it as good as I can get it. And when you get it that good, you need to quit. So that's where I'm quitting right there. I think it's going to be perfectly fine. You know, you always want better, but I think that's as good as you can expect on this one. Well, while the back and tail piece is setting up, you can see now that we're much further along. It frankly amazes me that we're almost there. These are the parts we have left. And if you can see them all moving around, those are the main parts, and then there's lots of little bitty pieces too. Just going to see what I can make fit next. And this part's not that easy because they're not obvious at this point. So I'll see what I can figure out off camera here, and I'll show you what I'm gluing up. Well, my friends, I've decided I'm going to try to fit up this piece back in here. And the thing is that it has a piece of purfling attached to it. Hopefully you can see that against that little piece of purfling attached there. And it has to fit into a slot there, and unfortunately the slot's gotten a little bit smashed and glued and things since, you know, all of this was busted in here and we were gluing it all back together at once. So I've got the world's smallest Dremel cutter here. Seriously, there is a little tiny ball cutter on the end of that, but I'm sure you can't see it. It is tiny. In fact, let's just measure it to see how tiny it is, because it is just incredibly small. I don't even know where I ever got this. It's only 25 thousandths of an inch across. Actually, it's probably less than that. Let me check it here. 23 thousandths of an inch across, which would be, you know, about a half a millimeter for my millimeter friends. And I'm going to get in here and open up that slot for the purfling.
They say when it rains, it's the Lord.
I think I might have it ready. Wow, boy, it's close. Might just scratch it a little bit with the back of the X-Acto blade to open it up a little bit more maybe. Kinda think that'll go now. I think I can force it in there if nothing else. So here we go.
He's crying for all our pain.
I believe that's going to work right there. I'll pull this in a little bit just to make sure it stays tight, but other than that, I think we're in good shape. Well, my friends, for old chocolate, the days keep changing just like the pages in a book. They just keep turning. And we have a number of things to put back in here today. You can see we're down to those few parts. And I've got two little pieces laying right here yet. So we're going to work on this area right here and try to fix this up. The first piece is this little tiny fragment there, and that's got to go in on this chip out of the side right here, right there. Unfortunately, that piece seems to be missing. It might still turn up, you never know. I haven't searched the case extensively yet, and I will do that. There might be something in the crack of the case or something that I haven't found yet.
In our fears, now I know. Don't believe what they say. 'Cause
Maybe you can see how that cleans off the parts by just scraping them with the edge of an X-Acto blade, for instance. Uh-oh. I'm sure there was already a crack there, but it cracked more. Shouldn't put the glue in there yet, but I was trying to get it to go back together. But anyway, this other little tiny piece goes off this brace. It's hardly worth putting in there, but we'll put it back if we can put it back. Well, we'll put this in first, and if that little piece can fit in there, we'll get it in there. The little tiny piece fit right inside of there, if you can see where I'm pointing there. It's hard to see it, but there's a little tiny piece down inside there that fit just like a glove. Yep, perfect. So that helps lock those little pieces back together. And now we'll get some clamps and put around this. So that's how I end up clamping that kerf back, is just using normal clothespins. And then we've got some kerf that's loose on this side that's fortunately not broken, but I can probably get the X-Acto blade in there and scrape a little bit and clean it out a little bit. And you can use the pressure of the bottle to actually get the glue down in there. And I think we've done that pretty well. You can probably see how the glue is squeezing out down the inside under there. So it's all the way through. That ought to take care of that. Now I'm going to take a minute and just do some cleanup and try to get things ready. We're almost ready to join the top to the back, though we are going to do some cleating and things like that before we do that. I'm trying to get rid of the excess glue and things like that that we'll be gluing to. My friends, I've spent about 10 minutes off camera just cleaning the top of this. All of the cracks lined up perfectly except right here, and I had to blend that a little bit, and of course that means removing some of the original finish and stain and stuff, and I may have to do a little more blending right there because I don't want to feel a big bump there, and you know, it just is what it is. You try to glue all this stuff up, but there were so many broken pieces in this area when I glued that up that, you know, that one somehow just slipped. I had it aligned, I'm positive, but it somehow slipped. Regardless, other than that one little, if you want to call that a mistake, other than that little mistake, everything else is really darn good. You know, we're still missing a hole here. I'm missing a chunk of wood. We're still missing some pieces around here that we can work on a little bit. And we're still missing a little bit of purfling in a few places. All I did was I cleaned this with warm water, and then I took a pick and scraped what little bit of glue squeeze out there was still on the top, and it came right off. Came off really easy. Didn't scratch the finish. So my goal, I think now, is to, you know, as I work on this, is to try to think of ways to disguise these cracks a little bit, you know, with some dye and different things, and try to get them to blend back in. And then I think I'm going to put one coat of oil varnish over the top of the whole thing to try to blend it across and make it look really nice. At least one coat. It might take 2 coats, but I think when I do that, a clear oil varnish over this, you know, I don't think you're going to hardly be able to tell that it was that busted. You know, from the inside, it really doesn't look that broken. There's still some glue and stuff I've got to clean up, but on the inside, it doesn't really look all that broken. There's one spot up here still, and then there's this spot right here where it broke pretty good, but we're going to do some cleating in there, some very light cleating, just enough to, you know, make a difference. Overall, it's pretty good. So I think maybe I'll turn my attention to this spot here and see what I can do to fill that in. That's not an easy fill right there, unfortunately, but we'll see what we can do. Well, my friends, I told you I was going to do an extensive case search, and I turned up this little piece right there, which, as it turns out, fits this hole on the side. Perfect. So it was worth searching. That's one more hole I don't have to try to fill. So I'm going to try to get that in place right now as we speak. I've got this piece fitting in this hole fairly well. I would be lying if I said it fit perfectly. It doesn't, but it is the piece that goes there. It's just that it doesn't align now because of all the other breaks and cracks that were in that area that have already been glued. But I have got it fitting pretty well, and it's certainly better than a big hole. And you can see it's kind of squeezed into place. In fact, it's almost invisible there now. I wouldn't call it invisible, but almost. Especially if I can keep it pushed into place. I think I'll just put a pick there and squeeze it with a little clamp, and I hope that'll do it. I don't know if I can get a little clamp all the way over there or not. These clothespins are in the way, and so I can move some of them out because that's been drying for over an hour. I think that'll work. So we'll let that set for a little while. My friends, another weekend has passed. Chocolate has been sitting. The only things left to fix on the top before we do the cleats is to fix this hole right here. And that piece of wood is missing. I cannot find it. I've checked the case very well. And then there's this around this corner here. This lip is missing. And most of that lip is laying in here. And then there's a few pieces of purfling that we might be able to fit in a place or two. So that's what we're down to. But this is the big fix at the moment, so we're going to work on this. This part along here is a fairly straight line, but it's jagged under a little bit, which wouldn't be too bad, but I'm just going to square that off to get a straight line mainly. I want a perfectly straight line and square sides so I can glue to it easy. That looks pretty good. It's pretty straight, pretty square. And now back under here, the problem is I would like to taper this backwards like so, but the problem is that brace ends right there. Again, it is what it is. So I think I'm just going to square it off. I would prefer to taper it under. I think I can make it hide it better, but in this case, I think I'm just going to square it off because I don't really have many options. And then this part here is kind of a mess. You know, I could try to make some weird shape there, or I could just square it off. And if I square it off, it'll be so much faster and easier to make the piece that would fit it, and I can make it fit it tighter. So I'm just going to square it off also. Looking pretty good, fairly squared off now. Should be able to fit something in there without too much trouble, I think. So now I'll go cut me a piece of wood that I think I can make fit in there. And of course, as always, we'll cut it a little oversized and sneak up on it. I found me a tight grain piece of spruce that was just a little oversized. And then I just took this and ran it into the thickness sander and narrowed down one edge. I squared up one corner of it first, of course, and then I ran this through and through until I got it about the proper thickness and also about the proper width. It's a little bit wide and I know it's a little thick. But that gave me a handle to hold on to and run it in and out of the thickness sander. So we're in the ballpark. Now I think I'm going to actually make the hole fit the piece of wood. Now that appears to be pretty close. I think I've got it fairly straight there now, so now I will go ahead and just run it through the thickness sander one more time here and clean that up. Spent a little bit more time off camera tweaking this, and then I cut it off to length, and as you can see, it fits it like a glove. If you turn it upside down, it fits it perfectly. When I'm looking at it from the bottom side, there's a little gap there. Right here, there's a little gap. So the angle isn't straight. We're going to have to work on that, or I'm going to have to, maybe I could just push it down deeper in. That's probably all it would take now that I think about it. Except that that doesn't quite get it either. It gets it really close. So I'm going to have to work on the angle just a little bit more to get it to work. In other words, it's too high back here. I need to lower this down just a little. That actually lengthens it a little bit, which is probably not a bad thing. Yeah, that really looks good now. And then the only thing now is, because of the angle, I want to taper the front of this just a hair to make fit that a little better too. It's so minor. It's so minor, but on the other hand, every little surface you can get contacting just makes it that much better. So probably won't take much more than just a rub across the sandpaper to get that done. That's pretty pretty darn close to perfect fit there. Now you can see it sticks through proud on this side and on this side, and all that just has to be carved back after it dries. It'll hold itself in there because it's in there very tight, so that's a good thing. That's as good as it needs to be. I'll just clean up that little glue there and we'll let that sit and do its thing. While this is doing its thing, and I'm not worried about bumping that because it's in there really tight, trust me. There's a hole right here, and actually the hole, I can see the tip of the X-Acto knife extending through on the inside in there. So this is a fairly large hole, piece of wood missing. It's not terrible. You could fill it with filler and nobody'd ever really see it. But on a nice violin like this, or an expensive violin like this, I'm going to try and clean the hole out a little bit. In other words, you have to make it worse to make it better. And then I'm going to try to fit an actual sliver of wood in there instead of filling it with filler. It's a little more work, not that terribly much more work actually, just a little more work. But I would prefer to fill it with a piece of wood rather than filler if we can. It won't be easy to do. I've found a sliver of wood here that really matches the old stuff pretty well that I can't find anywhere else this can fit. So I think I'm just going to use it right here. I'm sure it's from the violin itself. I think I can make this piece fit in there really well. And I have really looked over the violin a lot trying to find where this could fit, and I can't find any place, so it might as well go back in right here.
What the truth, it be crying.
Try to zoom you in a little bit better. It's hard to keep it in camera when I do that, so I'll try. I think that's going to fit, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill the hole. If it'll show it, there's the close-up of the little splinter of wood I put in there. And of course, after it's, cleaned up and smoothed off a little bit, stained, you probably won't even be able to tell it. Now, where it broke across the grain here, there's some little tiny holes, and we could maybe fill some of that too. It would be better to use real wood if we can. There's a fairly significant little gap right here, and I don't know, it's hard to say what to do there, but I think I will try to fill it. There's a little overhang here, just cleaning it out. Kind of a tedious job, but I think it's the better way to go. Again, I've got a couple of splinters here that I don't know where else to fit them, so I might as well try to use them here. Doesn't look that great right now, but once we clean it up, smooth it off, then that little fill piece there will blend right in, I believe. Not much left there now. May have to get the rest of that with just plain old filler because it's tiny, tiny. You just got to do what you got to do and do the best you can. People get on you about fixing things like this, that it's, not the way the old master would have done it. Well, sorry, but the old master's not here, and this thing's on my desk, so this is how I'm fixing it. There's some purfling that we're going to try to get back in place. I think that's where that one goes. Nope. This is a longer piece of purfling that I'm going to try to fit into this slot here. I'm sure it goes real close to that spot, even if that's not the exact spot.
Whisper, oh Lord, send me some rain.
doesn't help that this little tiny purfling is just about as brittle as glass. It just wants to break, and so you're trying to clean off this old stiff glue to make it fit back into a tiny little slot. It doesn't like it at all. Well, if it's going to fit, this is probably it. Yeah, there's still something in the way. I can't even tell what it is. But I think it's down in here. That's getting pretty close. It's probably as close as I'm going to get it. But the problem is we got these other pieces that have to fit on here too, so don't know how that's going to affect it. They're jagged, they're not real smooth, so finding an edge to even glue up is not that simple. There's really not much left to glue up to. Getting this to hold is going to be fun.
Just a few drops to rain on my pain and look to the west.
Well, that's what I finally came up with for holding it in place, and it seems to be working. The purfling kind of wants to work its way back out of the slot a little bit, but I just keep pushing it back down in there. Not much I can do to make it any better right now. We'll just let that have to sit and percolate. This here has been sitting for 20 minutes now probably, and it's looking pretty good. We'll have to give this all a little bit of time and come back to it and look at it in about an hour or two, see what it looks like. In this area here, there was a ton of trauma, as you can see it better on the outside, how it's broke all around out in here, just tons of little pieces. 2 big cracks going up through here, actually 3 big cracks going up through here. Cracked all the way in this whole area. So this is the area that needs to be strong on the violin. So I'm going to make an unusual call that's going to do a semicircle around this area. It's going to be very thin, but it's just, I feel like it's a necessary evil in this case. You know, I don't see how we can avoid it. If we really want to make sure this thing lasts, I think we just have to do it. I'm going to keep it as thin as I can so that it doesn't affect the sound that much. Being back here at the very tail, it won't hurt the sound too badly anyway. I just feel like we got to do it. I don't feel like we have a choice. Actually, I think I'm even going to do more than just the call. As I look at it here, there's a pretty deep hole that just didn't line up. This is fairly straight from here to here, so I think I'm just going to straighten this out, make it worse again before I make it better, make it possibly a V shape or something. I'm going to glue a piece of wood in there, try to fill that gap as tightly as I can with a good strong piece of wood, then smooth it back off. If we can fill that, you know, and have the glue stuck in there really good, that's going to strengthen that a lot, because obviously a crack like that, an open hole, if you will, is not got any strength at all. And even though we will have a cleat spanning that, it still would not be very strong compared to filling it first and then cleating it. A lot of extra work, but I think it's worth doing. My friends, this is another one of these things I would tell you, don't try this at home. Not unless you're really pretty good with a Dremel tool. So here we go.
The sky.
Basically that just made a kind of a V slot. It's a little bit of a semicircle. I'm going to see if I can't straighten it out a little bit more, because it'll be a lot easier to fill. This thing was not rotating properly. It was kind of, it had a lot of run out in it, and I don't know why. Shouldn't actually. Try it again.
Lord, send some rain.
That's pretty good, pretty straight. I think I can get a piece of wood that I can make fit that hole fairly well. I'm going to straighten it up more with the X-Acto knife to get it almost perfectly straight and flat. That's a key thing, because you want to make sure that your fill thing is going to have good contact. Well, in order to make a caul that fits this, and I want it to fit it kind of like a glove, I've gone around this like so, and I've got a little pencil mark around there now that I'm going to cut out and try to make this fit real tight up against there. Well, my friends, I've made a patch here to cover up this whole broken area here, and it fits it pretty much like a glove. And you might think, well, that's pretty obtrusive, but keep in mind this is only 52 thousandths thick, and 52 thousandths is less than a 1/16 of an inch for those of you who measure that way, or it's about 1.25 millimeters approximately. So that gives you some idea. It's pretty thin, very lightweight. It's not going to add a whole lot of bulk or anything, but the grain is growing this way, which is perpendicular to the top, and it's perpendicular to most of the breaks. So that should add a ton of strength to this area when we glue it down. And I will go around it after I get it glued in place, and I will also bevel off this edge to make it just kind of blend almost down to the top. Anyway, it's, you know, it is what it is. I didn't break it, I'm just fixing it, and I think this is the most surefire way of fixing it solid. But before I glue that into place, I'm going to fill that little hole I made there, and we'll do that right now. Well, my friends, I tell you what, this fitting that little piece in there was a real challenge, but it's curved a little bit on the back side. I had to shape it very uniquely, but once I got it finally shaped, it fits the hole pretty good. It doesn't move around, and the one thing you need to learn about doing this kind of work is when to quit. And so I'm going to quit right there, and we'll glue that in place. Both of those clamps have leather built on both pads, so I'm just going to hold that patch in there as tight as I can. Then we'll shave it off smooth, and then we'll put the big patch on. Well, chocolate's been sitting for an hour or two now, so I'm going to carve off all this extra wood that we don't need. You know, that's the secret of making a instrument. You do know that, I guess, and that is that you just glue a bunch of boards together, and then you carve away everything that's not that part of that instrument. So that's what we're doing here now. We're carving away this part of this because it's not part of this instrument. What remains is part of the instrument. See, it's just that simple. You thought it was hard to make an instrument, didn't you? Just 2 steps. Glue boards together and then carve away everything that doesn't belong there. I have to sharpen that back up. I thought that was sharper than it is. It's not cutting that real well. And I've got it turned over now, and I'm carving the last little bit of it off of there. The trick here is that you just don't want to slip and scratch the top, so I'm trying to be careful. Sometimes that's easier said than done too. Sometimes I just go back to my good old trusty finger plane, because that little dude will cut anything and easy for me to control. And sometimes the piece of wood wants to be carved in a different direction. And this one's not carving particularly easy in this direction, but it's working. Pretty close. It's not perfect yet. As you can see, it's still raised up just slightly. So now is the tedious part. You just gotta take your time and you just kind of curl it off of there.
It's the Lord shedding tears. He's crying for...
That's pretty good. That's getting pretty close. Now what I do when I get that close is I typically just take some sort of a scraper. In this case, I'm going to use this because it's very easy to control this pretty accurately. And then I just scrape the last little bit down to the surface, because that kind of feels like you're sanding it, except it even makes it smoother if you do it right. Yeah. I'm having a tough time even feeling it now, so it's very good. I'm actually feeling this out here more than I'm feeling that now. Alright, so let's just, for grins, let's just see if it goes away when we put a little stain on it. So let's just put a little stain on it and see if it goes away. Well, it can be better. That's just a quick and dirty. You can see it if you turn it in the right light because it's dull compared to the other finish. But otherwise, it's not too bad. It's not invisible, but yet it's done well enough that we can make the whole thing look really good when we're getting close to finished. Well, I'm going to carve this little block off now that the glue's had plenty of time to set, and I want to get this carved smooth, and then we'll put the caul on here to clean up this whole back area. I get lots of questions about my chisels. These are the 2 cherry chisels that I've bought, and I like them real well. They're made in Germany. I bought the entire set. I think they go from 1/4 inch up to about 1 inch, and actually they're in millimeters, but I forget what the millimeters are. In fact, this is a 6 millimeter here is what this is. Can't really see it very well, I can tell, but I have to turn it this way to cut the last little bit off.
Now I know, don't believe what they say, 'cause if it were the truth, he'd be crying today.
Well, that turned out really good, but even better than I expected it to. That filled it perfectly full, and you can't even feel it now, so it's nice and smooth. And you know, that's much better than having a big wide crack there. So that's going to be real nice. Now we should be able to move on to putting in our filler piece. And I believe that's how it goes, but I'm going to double check it here. I believe it goes this way. Seems to fit better that way. That ought to make it really strong. And then we'll carve it thin around the outer edges here and taper it back. So, as I said before, this is only about 1.25 millimeters, or about 1.25 millimeter. Less than 1/16 of an inch by quite a bit. That should work just fine. So I'm happy with that. I think what I'm going to do is just very lightly pencil around this, just real light, so then I can see what needs to be cleaned up in that area there. And I'm going to go ahead and just clean up that area, get it real clean, fresh wood exposed so the glue will hold really good. So I'm just going to scrape it like that and get it good and clean, and I'll show you what that looks like just before I glue it on. Well, I think you can see how I cleaned that all off really clean down to bare wood, and this fits it just perfectly. And we'll get that glued on, and I'll show you what that looks like all glued up. Well, you know, I don't know if 6 clamps is enough for that little tiny spot, but if I could get more on there, I probably would. It's hard to clamp something flat and get it to stay down perfectly, but that's about as good as I can do. That'll certainly make the back end of the old fiddle really solid again. I have finished this top as well as I can finish it. I mean, considering how many places that thing was broke, I think that's as good as it can be done. It looks good on the inside. I may still cleat a few places on the inside, but right now, just because I feel like it, I'm gonna go ahead and varnish this baby. I've got some oil varnish in this little cup right here, and you know, I could be getting the cart in front of the horse a little bit by doing this, but I'm kind of anxious to see what it's going to look like. And it's easier to set this off to dry like this, I think. So I'm going to do it. I've sanded it off camera with 400 grit, wet or dry, and I just did it dry. I've got all the little niches filled that I can find. I used real wood to fill it whenever I could, and the truth of the matter is I did use a little bit of filler here and there, but nothing that was major. To do oil varnishes well, you try to brush just in one direction, or at least in just one direction with the grain. And you try not to go back over what you've already brushed much, but sometimes you just have to. But that's looking pretty sweet to me. We'll let that sit and dry probably overnight. We'll put another coat on there. Right here where the bare wood patch is, it's soaking that up really fast, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more there. That looks pretty good. So I think I'll just let that set overnight now, and we'll see what it looks like in the morning. The only thing I don't feel confident on the repairs of this violin so far is this. And that's because it's thin, it's glued on the edge, and there's a lot of pressure on that sometimes with your chin. I don't think this will hold as it is, but you know, it's still worth a little bit of extra work. And some people would say, just buy a new one. Well, these real ebony ones are expensive. I mean, you're probably talking 40, 50 bucks at minimum. So if you can spend a few minutes and fix it and make it work, then I say it's worth it. If you have to spend a lot more time than that, obviously it's not worth it. But just, you know, 10 minutes of my time, you know, I think it's worth trying. So I'm going to do that. I've just cleaned it off real good here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one long cleat all the way across here with ebony, clamp it down real good, and then I'm going to recarve it back to make it look like it's going to fit this real well. I think that's a good idea, and at least that's what I'm going to try. Well, my friends, there's one thing I do know, and even as badly as you can see that this was all broken through here, even that badly, I know for a fact it will not ever break there again. That little brace, even though it's thin and the grain is turned across this way, you know, I've thinned it way down. You can just barely feel it. You know, I just beveled it back as far as I thought I could get away with, and, you know, left it about 1.5 millimeters thick in the middle, something like that. Or 1.25 millimeters, about 1.25 millimeters, something along those lines in the middle there. But that is very solid, and I don't think it's going to hurt the sound much. You know, everything hurts the sound, if you will. If you think of it as the sound being as perfect as it can be the day it's finished, well, everything you do to it after that generally takes away from the sound for the most part. But you know, with the restraints I had and constraints I had, I think that's as good as you can do and will hurt the sound the least. So there you go. My friends, several days have passed since I filmed anything on the violin. I've put one coat of oil varnish over the back damaged area there. Looking better, but still needs a little bit of work, but that's not looking terrible considering how bad it was. And I've put 2 coats on the top here and I am steel wooling between coats, and I think this needs one more coat before we can level it out and clean it up. I'm going to steel wool it right now. I'll show you a little bit of that process. This is the very fine steel wool. Well, you can see the process there. It's a little labor intensive. It takes a little while. I'm almost done with it. It's probably going to take me another 15 minutes to be satisfied. And then we're going to put another coat, hopefully a final coat of varnish on there.